You're listening to the Worst of the Worst podcast. I'm Matt, and with me as always we have Maddie.
What's happening?
And we have John.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest. Ian, tell us about yourself. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Ian.
Yeah, you really put him on the spot there, Matt.
Yeah.
That was out of order, really.
It's hazing. Everyone new to the podcast has to be hazed under pressure.
We did the initiation ritual before we started recording.
I've got my ring, I've got my robe, I'm in.
So, one of the reasons why we got you on the pod is because you're Vietnam's leading Scientologist.
Absolutely. I am the head of the Scientology Church in Bien Hoa. There are 5 of us. No, I'm kidding. No. The real reason they asked me here was that my father was a Scientologist, or he dabbled in Scientology. Yeah, the anecdote is that when my dad passed away, we continued to receive their magazine called The Auditor. Even when we moved house, we still continued to receive the Auditor magazine.
Yeah, they managed to track you down and find you no matter what.
They managed to track us down. And if I'm not wrong, I can actually check up with my mum. I believe she still gets it. And he's been dead for 20 years.
Seems like a lot of work to follow the family of a...
In the vague hope that someone might open that magazine and...
That's intense.
Subscribe, yeah.
So, how do they know you've moved house?
Well, exactly.
They're always watching.
They got people on the inside.
And how dangerous would it be for us as a project to join Scientology and then report back on your podcast?
We've actually got somebody on the inside right now who's just biding their time.
We're not going to say who?
Well, no, because that would blow their cover.
That would jeopardize the project. I get it.
That's why I didn't tell you sooner, because I knew you would do something like this. We gotta. You're both on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah. What do you think was the draw for him?
He was a seeker. He was looking for an answer in anything except Christianity. Yeah. But I mean, he did Eastern religions, meditations, he did yoga,
so he was looking for an
breathing
answer.
Techniques, all that. He was looking for something. I don't think he ever found it. So, and I think that is definitely an aspect that draws people to Scientology, is we're giving the answers that you didn't find elsewhere.
So we're going to talk about the worst recreational drug. But quickly, what's the best?
Ecstasy.
Why?
Very few fatalities.
A lot of
it's
fun.
not called ecstasy for nothing. I'm led to believe. It doesn't have the lingering effects that other psychedelics have. Some people experience sort of midweek come downs and blues and things, but in general, it's relatively safe.
But that's if you're getting pure ecstasy, because again, a lot of the stuff you could be buying is probably laced with
heroin and
rat poison.
Who knows? Well, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, but there didn't seem to be too many ecstasy fatalities. Yeah, look, if we compare cannabis, LSD, mushrooms, those psychedelics, although in terms of lethality are very low, their psychological consequences are higher, I think, than ecstasy.
My pick would have been mushrooms, because I don't know of any negative consequences.
Yeah, I think it's probably the safest recreational drug, but not necessarily the best.
Maybe
if you
not
take
the
30
best.
grams of mushrooms, you're going to meet God.
My pick would be weed. Weed's good for the soul.
Good for the soul. It grows from the earth. It's natural.
It's like having a beer. It just chills you out.
It just chills me out. And unlike beer, weed's never killed anyone.
Exactly.
I used to really think that all drugs should be legal with just the proper regulation. And then the opioid epidemic in the States made me kind of think, actually what'll happen is that companies will just create
no, Portugal's tested it, right? They have, it's 100% legal. You can't be caught with a kilo brick of coke and expect to get away with it. But if you're caught with a usable personal use quantity,
it's not a criminal
offense. And a lot of their problems have fallen by the wayside.
Yes, in Portugal, I wonder in the context of America, where the healthcare system, where it's so for-profit driven, the confluence of money and medicine in the States is super toxic. And I don't think the system can regulate itself.
No.
That makes sense?
No.
If they say cocaine is legal under the right regulatory circumstances, within 10 years there's going to be big cocaine. You know what I mean?
That's a good question, Nat. I mean,
see, weed's a little different because you can grow it, right? Something like cocaine, you'd have to
manufacture.
You have to manufacture, right? Which I think lends weed to a cottage industry.
Exactly. Yeah, it would need to be the manufacturer would need to be regulated as well, so that people knew what they were getting.
Yeah, well, totally, absolutely. But it wouldn't be like
Bob's homemade Coke.
Right. Exactly.
Mom and pop Coke shop.
You wouldn't be like, hey, my parents made some coke. Do you want
Yeah.
some?
Do you guys want
You
to
know?
come around?
We've got some beautiful craft coke.
In the last 10 years, weed has boomed in the States. Like, absolutely. I went from like having to get it from sketchy guys in university to 2 years later being able to walk into a store.
But who's growing it? Is it big pharma or these private individuals?
They are normally big companies, but not. It's
Not mega big.
Most of it's not mom and pop. My understanding, at least in Washington State. I know
And there's
the
a reason for that, right?
The regulations are insane. Is my understanding.
So in my investigation into medicinal weed, the big problem is that every plant is going to have a different THC, CBD content.
Mhm.
And so to get weed lab tested is time consuming and expensive. So if you're growing the same strain of weed in controlled environment, which is very difficult for mom and pop, but achievable for big pharma, that's always going to be a problem. Your local head shop cannot with certainty say that this weed is X potency.
But I've always thought, or I've been told that like the names of the strains, most of it's completely arbitrary. Some people know where they get the seeds from, but who you have no idea.
No.
Yeah.
You've
Look,
no
if
idea.
you're growing a plant for yourself at home, who cares?
Yeah.
But if you, as soon as you're selling it, then there's the onus of responsibility falls on you.
Expectation of some sort of
You say
quality
it's
control.
17% THC,
Yeah.
it should be within a gram or two.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, and I think the same thing would happen with coke or heroin. That how strong is it? And that's one of the reasons for a lot of the overdoses is that people don't know what they're getting. I've been reading up just for personal interest on psychedelic therapy, and I think that's where its biggest strength lies. Is that all of these MDMA, LSD, psilocybin from magic mushrooms are all potent therapeutic tools when used in the right environment, in the right setting.
I mean, I've been on ketamine treatments, and I
Didn't care for them.
I enjoyed them at the time. Enjoyed them at most of them.
Treatment for
depression.
Okay.
And
Now psilocybin's the big new depression treatment. I would not. Ketamine's a horse tranquilizer.
So when you say a ketamine, what did they actually prescribe you with?
No, it was like a drip. Like I saw shit. You know what I mean? You can't describe it. You know what I mean? You just wake up and you're like, "Whoa, what?
What was that?
You see, now I've just written, just a few months ago, wrote a paper on psychedelic therapy, specifically psilocybin, and there's a huge boom in research around the world, specifically in the UK, and how effective it is in terms of duration. So the placebo group, who were being given regular over-the-counter antidepressants versus the control group or the other group who were being given the psilocybin, the regular antidepressants you have to take weekly. Psilocybin, 1 shot, 6 months.
Wow.
Follow up, another shot, 6 months. So for 6 months.
6
months.
And it's not only in your system, it's having an active effect on the way you think and the way you operate.
100%. And there's follow-ups all the time. So there's a scale, a depression scale, and you answer questions to ascertain your level of depression. And the people who were on psilocybin could not be classified as depressed for 6 months.
How intense is the physical feeling of taking that drug?
The therapy is pretty intense. Like, it's emotional, and there's tears and vomiting, and I believe it can be emotionally intense.
And for the 6 months while you're technically on this drug, I suppose it must be in your system and it's
I think it changes the way you think.
It's really easy in depression to fall into the same negative thought patterns, right? Like it's really, really easy.
Okay.
That's just calcified. You know what I mean? At a certain point, like you start thinking the same thing over and over and over again, and eventually you don't even know you're thinking it because it's just so ingrained.
Yeah.
This is how things are. This is just the way your brain works.
Yeah.
And a drug like that can
break it.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're thinking different
Can break
thoughts.
the vicious cycle.
Yeah, all of a sudden.
The best graphic representation I can give you is your brain is a snow-covered mountain. You walk to the top of the mountain and you ski down, and your skis leave 2 tracks. You walk back up the mountain, and it's easier to follow those 2 tracks. Those are neurological pathways, those 2 tracks. When you take magic mushrooms, it's a fresh sprinkling of snow, and those tracks are covered up, and you can create a new neurological pathway. So it breaks the old thinking patterns quite literally. There are neurological pathways that get formed, and depression, as John said, is people stuck in those loops, and this seems to break it, and new patterns emerge. It's really interesting, with
That's
minimal side effects.
fascinating, yeah.
And of course, microdosing, where you don't have the tears and the vomiting and the emotional one shot, but that takes longer. So maybe mushrooms are our winner there.
Yeah, I think mushrooms are the best.
Anyway, so our main topic for today is the worst recreational drug.
The worst recreational drug? You've got an interesting one, Matt.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's recreational. It's scary. And I want to put a question to you. How do you guys feel about necrosis? So your skin...
Don't know what it is.
I'm pro
your
necrosis.
Skin, you're for necrosis. I'm not talking about necrophilia, John.
Sorry, I misheard you. No, I don't know. I don't know what necrosis is. Sorry.
So necrosis is when your skin goes gray and rots and starts falling off your body. Your flesh starts falling off your body, and you're actually able to peel it away and see bone.
Oh, God. Sounds like leprosy.
It basically is. Tips of your fingers can fall off. Tips of your toes can fall off. Your skin can be pulled away to reveal bone. And so the drug that I'm going to talk about, which I think is the worst, is called desomorphine, or the street names are Krokodil, Russian Magic, Poor Man's Heroin, the Zombie Drug, and Flucker.
So this is that toxic that your body starts falling apart.
That's why
like
it's called
literally.
the zombie drug, because your body starts decomposing when you use it.
That's pretty bleak.
So it's a derivative of codeine, which is obviously laced with other things like gasoline, paint thinner, lighter fluid, iodine, hydrochloric acid, and red phosphorus. All these compounds.
Very natural.
Very natural. All these very natural things going into it.
Why does it enhance the effect?
It's hard to say. Apparently, it's about 10 times as potent as morphine, but has similar effects to morphine, like the euphoria and the painkilling
It's
effects.
cheaper to produce.
Who discovered that?
Who knows?
Let's mix this together and see what happens.
It's common in Russia because
I was going to say it's called Russian Magic. So what does it come from Russia, does it?
Because codeine tablets do not require a prescription in Russia.
Okay.
So they're able to buy it over the counter, and they can only sell like X amount to people over the counter, and you can just leave and come back and buy it again.
Come back with a fake mustache.
So yeah, basically it's 10 times as potent as morphine, but has similar effects. It costs a fraction. So if, for example, if what it would cost to purchase heroin or morphine would cost maybe $200, this would cost $20. And basically it just makes you feel euphoric. The where you intravenously inject it into yourself, that's where the necrosis starts. And you actually stop being able to see your veins, so they start injecting into other places and their bodies start decomposing. For the listeners listening, I wouldn't suggest it, but if you want to go look and type in the effects.
How do you spell this Krokodil?
Krokodil.
Okay, so it's with K's, not C's.
But the chemical name is desomorphine.
So where is this a big problem? Like everywhere? I've never heard of it before.
Mainly in Russia. It's mainly countries where codeine is easily accessible. Apparently it has made its way to the States, but it's not an epidemic there yet, where it is an epidemic in Russia, where they are maybe not in the most financially suitable positions, and it's just really easy to access.
It's an opioid, yeah? You could say it's like...
Yeah, you could say it's an opioid, yeah.
So it's just like a super dirty heroin, basically.
Super dirty heroin. Poor man's heroin.
So you inject it?
You inject it, yep. 100%.
Can it not be taken orally, or...?
I would imagine so, but the most common way to take it, and that is what causes the necrosis, is when you inject it.
I'm looking at some pictures right now.
And how do you feel about them?
That is not cool. That is absolutely minging. Yeah, have a look. That is pretty scary. I mean, if they just put posters up, do you want a leg like that?
I chose it as the worst because it literally turns you into a zombie. You literally fall apart. Your body falls apart.
I can understand your motivation as why this could be the worst drug.
Do you know like how many people are actually on this drug?
It's estimated that up to 1 million Russian citizens are using Krokodil.
Wow, as much as that.
And it's reaching epidemic proportions, and it is starting to emerge in countries like the States. And
how desperate is your life when you decide, I fancy me a bit of that?
I guess if you can't afford the heroin...
1 million's a fucking lot of people.
That's a lot of people, man. Look, maybe not 1 million are all decaying to the state that you've just seen, but 1 million people using it is...
What's Russia's population? About 160 million. That's a lot.
I don't think Russia cares.
About their people.
About the Krokodil users.
But surely you would think, like, that's clearly a visible epidemic. What the obvious solution to me would be to make codeine a prescription drug, like get a prescription.
So can people make this like at home because
people are making it at home
because codeine's so accessible?
It's so accessible. Like there are anecdotes of buying as much codeine as they can, coming back an hour later and buying more because the pharmacy can only sell you X amount, but there's nothing stopping them from coming back later and just buying more.
So then they just need to regulate codeine.
Yeah, that would seem the simple solution, but it's a question as to why they haven't yet if it's such an epidemic.
Because they don't care.
Pharmaceutical companies don't want them to.
Another shitty thing about Krokodil is it only lasts 2 hours. The euphoria only lasts up to 2 hours. It's not a long-term commitment, and that's why they keep using it more and more, because it's such a short-term euphoric experience.
There's not a whole lot of sympathy towards users of such heavy drugs. You know what I mean? Like, especially for a country like Russia, do you think they're going to be like, you know what, let's take care of them for the rest of their adult lives, or just let them do their thing?
I think that's a lot of common opinion in many countries for intravenous users of any drug.
Not to single Russians out, I just imagine in the context of Krokodil.
People that are taking Krokodil, they're obviously taking it around people that have taken it before, and they've seen the physical effects, but they still choose to continue. Like that dependency is scary.
They're probably not first-time drug users. Nobody goes from zero to Krokodil overnight.
Right.
I think you were already using something else and ran out of money and then thought, well, I can't get heroin. So
and I can make this at home. I don't even have to meet a sketchy dealer somewhere. I can literally just go buy codeine at a pharmacy and go make this at home.
So far, I imagine that your drug is going to be the drug that I would least want to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they're like,
it doesn't sound appealing.
Yeah, you have one day to live. You can't see any of the people you know and love. What drug do you want to do? I still wouldn't choose Krokodil.
So in June 2012, between 5,000 and 7,000 deaths were attributed to Krokodil in Russia over the preceding 2 years. So I'm assuming it hasn't gotten better. It's still an epidemic. So probably on average 5,000 deaths a year from Krokodil.
Pretty bad.
I mean, in terms of the actual effect of the drug, it could be the worst.
It could be the worst.
Its mortality rate is surprisingly low.
Surprisingly low, yeah.
I wonder if it's just a recording problem, a measurement issue.
And again, I would imagine the lifestyles of people who take this drugs.
Yeah, I don't think their mates are going to go and tell the police,
right,
Johnny passed away.
Exactly.
Because they don't want to get investigated. Exactly. They don't want to get looked into.
And they're probably not very healthy in the first place.
No.
They could be dying of other things before that gets them. Like,
and nobody's doing research on this.
No, yeah.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares, exactly, yeah. They probably...
Which is sad in itself, but yeah.
Probably some part of an underclass in air quotes, just the
it's
people.
probably going to be... I don't think there's wealthy Krokodil users.
Yeah. No, probably not. They don't call it poor man's heroin for nothing.
Yeah, your daughter doesn't get like suddenly hooked on Krokodil. You know what I mean? Like, she says she was a normal girl, and then she started doing Krokodil. She's not the same.
Fell off. And never been the same.
Send her to boarding school. That'll fix her.
Well, my argument's different to yours, because I'm going to go with tobacco. The reason I've gone with tobacco is basically because, like, look, I'm not going to do a big long monologue on it because we all know what tobacco is. But it's just so normalized in our society. People do it regularly. In 2008, the World Health Organization named tobacco as the world's single greatest preventable cause of death.
Wow.
Which makes it, in my opinion, the worst because it's so easily preventable and it's so widespread.
And it's so easily accessible.
And so easily accessible.
And cheap.
So tobacco kills 8 million people each year.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Wow.
That's a lot of people.
Which is absolutely huge. And one thing that semi-surprised me is that it's not completely the same for all people. I thought this was just widespread kind of everywhere. It's not. Over 80% of tobacco users live in low and middle income countries. So it is worse for poor people.
In America, that's very clear. It's interesting to me that that's...
As I say, semi-surprised. Like, I'm not surprised that people smoke more here in Vietnam than they do in Norway and Iceland. I'm not surprised by that because of education, stuff like that.
Why do poorer people smoke more than rich people? Are they better
Stress,
educated?
Maybe?
I think part of it's stress. I think part of it's just it's normalized in those communities. Like, in high school, nobody smoked cigarettes because you'd be an idiot to smoke a cigarette.
Do you smoke cigarettes now?
No, I don't. But in college, I did. University did. But then you go home and your friends back at home would be like, "What? You're smoking a cigarette?" Like it was literally the dumbest thing you could do. There was no cool factor whatsoever.
And also, men smoke more than women.
Definitely.
So, of the world's global population, 36.7% of all men are regular tobacco smokers.
That's a big percentage.
Only 7.8% of women. So it's a huge difference.
Do you think that's because of children?
That's a good point. It could be. I think
it's not considered feminine.
I feel like men generally take less care of themselves than women do. I mean, there's that whole thing thrown out that men die younger than women. my understanding is that's not ungenetic. It's just that we don't look after ourselves as women.
Because we're stupid and we do stupid things.
Because we're idiots if we drink more and we smoke more, yeah.
And take risks, unnecessary risks.
Yeah.
In every aspect.
It's associated with masculinity, isn't it? Being someone who's willing to like take risks, I suppose.
Is that testosterone or is that cultural?
I think it's cultural.
And I think the woman smoking thing could be social cultural as well. That women who smoke are frowned upon and seen as harlots.
Yeah.
I remember in Taiwan where women were basically forbidden culturally to smoke on the streets, but behind closed doors, more women smoke than you realized. But you definitely wouldn't walk around if you were a girl with a ciggy dangling from your lips, because that was basically might as well put a sign on your head saying I'm a hooker.
If you were to smoke, let's say, in your youth for 10 years and then quit, if you quit for a long enough period of time,
I've heard that too.
Doctor would not be able to know from looking at your lungs. If
I've heard that. I've heard that
7
too.
years, I believe.
Yeah, there is an amount of time a year.
I mean, your body wants to be healthy,
right?
Like it tries its best to clean itself up. But yeah, I mean, I used to smoke, and I remember when I did smoke, it did serve functions. So if I'm in a social situation that I don't feel all that comfortable in, light a ciggy. It's almost like a shield. It's like
it's a shield.
I am doing something.
Yeah, like I'm participating in the social situation without having to actually engage.
It's a socially acceptable way to fidget. You know, like you can't just like play with your phone or your hair or something.
People think you're mad,
but you can
fidget with your ciggy. Yeah.
This is why I believe it's the worst, because it is so socially acceptable, so readily available. 8 million people die a year, as I've just said. Smokers
There's
on
a lot of
average
fidgeters out there.
There's a lot of fidgeters out there.
What do non-smokers do with their hands?
Vote Conservative. I don't know. Maybe.
How many non-smokers die a year? You're cherry picking the worst stats to suit your particular paradigm, and I'm going to counter that with how many non-smokers die every year.
I'm going to counter that with smokers die on average 10 years younger than non-smokers.
How do they know? Who's they?
Governments.
It's fake news, bro. It's all fake news.
So yeah, short and sweet, but I think tobacco's the worst drug.
Okay, tobacco's pretty bad. Tobacco's pretty bad, but I'm gonna change the subject a little bit. How much alcohol do you think is safe to consume?
Safe in what way?
Like how much alcohol does it take to have like basically no ill effects?
I think it's very little.
I phrased that poorly, but essentially, yeah, they did a study about 10 years ago in the UK with 25,000 participants. There is no safe amount of alcohol. There's none. Even moderate usage is correlated with gray matter reduction in the brain.
So making you dumber.
Makes you dumber. 25,000 people. There's no healthy amount. You're kidding yourself.
So even one beer a day.
That's what they said. There's no safe amount. It's one of the few drugs that can kill you from withdrawal. Straight up kill you.
So an alcoholic who goes cold turkey can literally die from not consuming alcohol.
Can literally die, yeah. Which I think is
pretty scary.
And pretty rare amongst...
Yeah, is there any other drug that does that?
I thought...
Does heroin do that?
No.
Wow.
I think you may wish you were dead.
According to the NHS, the amount... so here are some of the problems caused by long-term alcohol usage. High blood pressure, stroke, pancreatitis, liver disease, liver cancer, mouth cancer, head and neck cancer, breast cancer, bowel cancer, depression, dementia, sexual problems, infertility. That's like a whole... Like, that's everything for your body.
But are there any negative side effects, John?
Other than death.
Yeah.
Secondhand smoke is a real issue with tobacco, but I would argue that other than that, the externalities are pretty internal, right? The negative externalities in alcohol is massive. Like the effects that it has around people who aren't drinking is insane. Is absolutely insane.
You got an alcoholic in the house, you're all going to feel the effects of that.
Or if you have an alcoholic on the driving a car, someone's got so
flying a plane, operating a crane.
One American dies every 45 minutes in a drunk driving accident.
Every 45 minutes.
That's just Americans. So you just take that and extrapolate that across the whole world. In the early 2000s, the monetary cost of alcohol-related crime in the United States was over 205 billion. In the UK, around the same time, it was 7.3 billion pounds.
What kind of crimes?
So, 15% of robberies, 63% of intimate partner violence incidents, 37% of sexual assaults, about 45% of physical assaults, and 40% of homicides in the United States involved alcohol.
Charming.
Yeah, it makes everything worse. Our crime rates are worse. Our crime rates are worse. Our love lives are worse. Streets aren't safe. your health is worse.
Why is it legal? Why is it legal? Why is it so easily accessible?
Because big companies pay for it to be legal.
I do think people have a genuine need to get fucked up
I
Yeah.
agree.
But why?
because life is sad and you got to find some sort of release. And if you find that in drugs or religion or whatever, power to you if you find it.
In all honesty, if I meet someone who doesn't drink, smoke, anything,
You're suspicious of them.
well, yeah, like if they had a problem previously, I get it. But if you never had a problem, you're just like, I just don't like it, I don't do it. I am like, you're a bit weird.
And humans have been getting drunk for a very, very long time.
Don't other animals get drunk
And
as
other
well?
animals
Yeah.
too. I mean, elephants, baboons, monkeys, all
What,
kinds.
How?
Yeah.
But the marula
Drinking
fruit.
fermented fruit, eating fruit that's already rotting, it ferments in their stomachs and they get properly wasted. There's
Wow, sounds like a
several
party.
videos.
And we know that they're eating it to get wasted, not.
It's very deliberate.
Wow.
There's a fruit in South Africa or in Southern Africa called the marula tree, and the fruit is called marula. It's like a wild apple, and the animals congregate prior to them dropping, and they're waiting for this. And in fact, elephants have been seen shaking the tree to get the
To
fruit
get it
fall.
down.
And they know, those animals know this is the good time tree.
Yeah.
And it's once a year when it fruits and everybody gathers round. Everyone gets absolutely bollocksed. There's hilarious videos on YouTube. You can look for.
Elephant parties.
Actually, the elephants are entertaining, but the monkeys are the funniest. And warthogs.
Oh yeah,
Monkeys-
warthogs, eh?
Monkeys are funny sober. So I can only
They're
imagine.
doubly funny when they're wasted. It's
Wow.
and they have hangovers, and the next day they're grumpy. It's like absolutely,
That's amazing.
yeah. But I don't know of other countries that do it. Is it only Southern African animals?
They're the pissheads.
Yeah, that's where it started. The cradle.
The
of
Asian elephants, they control
Yeah,
themselves.
the Asian elephants on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
Exemplary elephants.
We're going off topic here. So why is alcohol the worst?
Besides all the negative externalities and the fact that it'll destroy
how
every
many
organ in your
people
body.
die a year?
I don't know. I mean, I thought the
You thought you'd done a good enough job, but you didn't.
I thought the drunk driving statistic was powerful enough.
Yeah, but so people only die from drunk driving.
Well, no, the World Health Organization thinks it's about 3 million deaths every year from harmful use of
Yeah.
alcohol.
Yeah.
5% of all deaths. They think 5% of global burden of disease and injury is attributable to alcohol.
I can easily believe that.
In people between the ages of 20 and 39, approximately 13% of total deaths are attributable to alcohol. This is again according to the World Health Organization.
How much alcohol do you think you consume in a month, John?
Really, not that much. Whenever I'm with you guys,
Are you blaming us now? Are you peer shaming?
I like to think I pretty much match you guys when we drink, and that's the only time I drink.
I feel like you're blaming us.
I'd probably drink less if I hung out with Ian more often. Like I'm not saying it's your fault, but
Ian, for the record, doesn't drink.
Ian, how long have you been sober for?
9 years.
Wow.
I was an Olympic drinker for South Africa. I won the world championship 7 times. I was a chef by trade,
Mhm.
and substance abuse is rife. Yeah, I used to drink a lot. I think I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't. There was nothing too bad that happened that I could say that was rock bottom. I mean, other than writing off a car. Yeah, I didn't kill anyone. I didn't drive over anyone. I didn't damage property. Yeah, there was nothing that bad. I didn't lose it all. So I got out, I think, before the writing was on the wall.
If you don't mind me asking, did it affect like your relationships with people?
Definitely, yeah, big time. A lot of relationships were built around alcohol
Mhm.
and the consumption of alcohol.
Mm.
So when I stopped drinking, those relationships evaporated. And so you realized that the relationship was not built on anything other than the
Yeah.
socialization of
Yeah.
alcohol.
And how was it getting off?
Horrible. It was really difficult. There was definite addiction to the point where I was uncomfortable, insomnia, massive sugar cravings. This is common apparently. So you lose weight radically fast because alcohol is very high in calories, especially when you're drinking at an Olympic level. If I had a beer now, what would happen? Would I go back to, that was delicious, I think I'll have another one, and another one, and another one, etc. I don't know. Would I be able to control myself now after 9 years? Like all alcoholics, I'm going to say no. I think if I had more than one beer now, I think would have a problem because I'd go downstairs and empty this place.
Any closing arguments for alcohol, John?
It just kills millions of people around the world. It causes massive health problems to everybody who participates in it, and most people participate in it.
Can I just say, though, I've had good times on alcohol, as I'm sure you have as well.
Few.
I haven't had many times where I'm like, oh, we got so fucked up on tobacco. And
Oh, I really loved going for that smoke break. Wow, it's a memorable smoke break. I'll remember that for the rest of my life.
yeah, like alcohol, for all of its negative effects, a lot of my best memories from my life, I was drunk for them. And I don't reckon I'm alone in that.
No, for sure not. For sure not.
But I think you have to balance that with how negative the negative effects of alcohol are, right? You can't just like wish them away. Like no one smokes too many cigarettes and then like drives into a family of 5. Most of the social benefits to alcohol you could replicate elsewhere with other things. I guarantee you, if we all took ecstasy right now, we would bond way better.
Is ecstasy better than alcohol?
Well, I
in
don't know,
terms of
if
health,
you
yeah.
Had ecstasy tablet for every bottle of beer you had, you'd probably have a problem. You can't take it as often.
Yeah.
So, okay, let me ask you this then. If ecstasy is more healthy than alcohol, if you have a child, what would you be more comfortable with your young child doing? Having a few drinks or having a tablet or even half a tablet?
Neither.
But if you had to pick one between the tablet and the, let's say,
fair
6
enough.
beers.
Okay, 6 beers. If you'd said 1 beer, definitely alcohol. But 6 beers and some ecstasy, take the ecstasy, leave that beer.
You'd take the ecstasy?
If they were the right age.
Of course, but let's say they're 18.
Yeah. And they said, Dad, help me choose. Get absolutely wasted on booze or take a pill. Take a pill, man. Leave that booze. See, the thing is that there's a gradient, right? You can choose to have 1 or 2 beers, which will mellow you out, social lubricant, but you can still function. Taking a drug, it's kind of 0 to full speed.
Yeah.
There's no way to taper it.
You can get a little bit drunk. You can't get a little bit
eat up.
But you can also know that 1 beer will do this. 1 pill might do something very different to the pill I take next time.
So that's where the difference lies. And you could argue the same with cannabis. You could have 1 drag of a joint as opposed to smoking the whole joint.
But do you think an everyday, like a seasoned drinker, maybe he's not a full-blown alcoholic, can taper their expectations? So like, I'm going to have 1 beer tonight. I'm going to have 2 beers tonight. Like they can sort of level that out. Like people that have a glass of wine with dinner.
People can do that. People can totally do that.
I'm just saying, you can't just have 1 Krokodil. You know what I mean?
Especially not with dinner.
Not white.
Not with dinner.
If Krokodil was as prevalent as alcohol, then I would have to give it up to Krokodil.
But this is the whole thing about alcohol: is it's so prevalent, it's socially acceptable,
right?
And the fallout from alcohol is the problem.
If it wasn't already so socially acceptable, like if we invented alcohol now, they would be talking about the ill effects like you wouldn't believe. You know what I mean? Like, this drug is destroying our communities.
But it should still be popular.
Oh, of course, people would love it.
Okay, so John's finished talking shit.
Alcohol's the worst, man. Obviously, and as far as scope and severity.
I want to argue with you, but I think you're right.
Well, don't say that before you.
No. I'm going to be talking about heroin, which is pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
It's got some problems.
Yeah, some issues.
We're not sold on it yet.
So, a bit of research into heroin. It's been around for a long time. So, heroin is right up there in terms of duration, as long as alcohol. First cultivated in Mesopotamia, which is current-day Iraq. First recorded 3,400 years BC. That's 5,000 years of opium use for humans. And it's probably older than that.
How long have we even been cultivating like farmland for? Like 10,000 years?
It literally coincides with agriculture.
Like, it's as old as food production in some places.
But you would still need a place rich enough to produce crops that don't have nutritional value.
The way in which it's recorded was not for pleasure. It was purely for dealing with pain.
Medicinal.
But even so, you would think at something like, okay, if you need to survive, you're not, the first thing you plant to be food to survive. Right.
Medicine and food.
But even I guess you would need.
Yeah, there's always a shaman or a healer or whatever, and they're like, look, this plant sorts out the pain, so we need a lot of that. The way in which they took it was predominantly, it would appear, for medicinal purposes. So first synthesized in 1874. We're talking about heroin here. Morphine was synthesized way before that. So morphine is the active ingredient in opium. Opium is the raw product you get from the poppy plant. The seed pod is scored, a latex fluid seeps out, and that latex fluid is removed. As it dries, it gets sticky, and as it dries, it turns into a dark paste, a malleable paste. And morphine is an ingredient within that opium. You can use opium straight from the plant, and it has in it.
So morphine is purified.
Morphine is an isolated compound. Yeah, it's a purified version. So that was like early 1800s.
So it's sap from a seed.
From a seed pod.
Seed pod. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a spherical pod. The seeds are inside. The pod is green, and that pod is scored. And when the pod is scored, it seeps this white milky sap. And they let it dry on the plant, and it's like a tacky brown residue. And obviously you need a lot of it to use. Anyway, so first synthesized by a British guy, and was called diacetyl morphine. So it was a morphine, concentrated morphine. And it was used, amusingly, to treat morphine addiction.
Of course.
So you use a stronger morphine to treat morphine addiction. Makes perfect sense.
Is that just because they literally didn't know what they were doing?
I think they were just playing around and let's see what happens.
Yeah.
But it didn't really go anywhere. So in 25 years later, Bayer pharmaceutical company in Germany further intensifies this stuff and reduces it further, and they make heroin for the first time, which is now 1.5 times to twice as potent as morphine. And the name heroin comes from the German heroisch, which means heroic or strong. And heroin became synonymous with the drug. So, it was a cough suppressant and a morphine substitute. But obviously the addictive qualities were quickly realized, and realized this was not a good idea. So it was banned in 1925, but this, kind of the same time as Prohibition, was pushed underground, and there was a massive spike in usage. Which is
makes sense.
A further conversation for later. As soon as you ban something,
right,
people you can't have it, then they want it. So that's kind of the sort of brief history, and its usage between 1925 and 2022. We're seeing weird spikes around the world in the 70s. In the 80s, it really started taking hold with the cartels. 90s was basically the peak of heroin use. Tapering off in around 2015. So I'm actually doing two drugs, because in 2015 we start seeing something called fentanyl, and fentanyl popped up in 1950, and it was an anesthetic. But for some reason, heroin is being cut, which is where they take the raw heroin, and to make it go further for profits, drug dealers cut it with something cheaper to make more of it and more profit, obviously. So they started cutting it with fentanyl, and this starts popping up in 2015. At the same time, the lethality goes up. Your overdoses go up radically from 2015. So just to throw some stats out there. So here we go. In 1999, I believe this is just America. And again, stats are a bit loosey-goosey around the world. As we discussed earlier, I don't think China is going to give us accurate stats.
Worldwide statistics are just not possible.
And there's a lot of heroin use in Turkey, but again, it's not being recorded. America, on the other hand, they write this stuff down. This is heroin overdose deaths, all ages from 1999 to 2020. In 1999, there were less than 20,000 overdoses. It just climbs exponentially. Well, let's stop at 2014. We had 45,000. In 2015, it jumps to 52,500. This keeps going up until 2019, when we hit 70,000. This is per annum. 70,630 deaths in 2019 from heroin overdoses with fentanyl mixed in. To 2020, where it hits 91,000, almost 92,000.
Per year.
100,000 people, almost 100,000 people a year dying from
in the United States alone.
In the United States alone.
Wow.
And that's not even including like things like Oxy.
And no, this is heroin being taken, either being smoked or intravenously. So this is not the Oxys and the Tramadols and all. Yeah. So that figure is way higher.
Yeah, it would be.
And this particular article, this is CDC in the States, stopped in 2020. They're seeing a decline in the use of heroin but an increase in the use of fentanyl straight because it's so cheap and it's so powerful. Fentanyl is 100 times stronger than heroin. The fatal dose for a human adult male is 30 milligrams of heroin will kill you. 3 milligrams of fentanyl will kill you. It's wildly poisonous.
So tell me, so morphine was already a highly concentrated version of opium.
Yeah, but
Heroin
morphine,
was-
strangely enough, is not. It's very addictive, but your overdoses from morphine you'd fall asleep.
Negligible.
Yeah, you'd
So-
just pass out.
And heroin's 10 times
Heroin-
stronger than morphine. and then
Only twice as
twice strong. Sorry, twice as strong. And then
Fentanyl's 100 times stronger
than that.
than that. So,
That is crazy.
like cannabis, you can't get enough of it in to kill you simultaneously. Morphine is normally administered orally or you smoke it. I suppose you could intravenously take morphine, and that would probably be bad. But heroin, twice as poisonous, will kill you, and fentanyl is just absolutely horrible. So why is it the worst drug? Because of its addictive properties. This is the crux of my argument. With that addiction comes a slave to getting the stuff, and people rob, kill to get the money to buy the stuff.
Because it's worse. It's a worse withdrawal.
The
than,
withdrawals are very unpleasant and prolonged.
How common is heroin where you use it from? It's pretty common where I'm
In
from.
South Africa, very
Yeah.
common.
And how's it perceived? Like, I use this word just to make the point. We refer to a smackhead
Yes.
Yes.
is
Same.
someone who takes heroin or crack.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
They're the hard smackhead's
Druggies.
drug.
Yeah.
And then you've got your other stuff, which is a bit more recreational, a bit
exactly.
more like, what,
These guys are dedicated to this. Yeah.
yeah.
It's not for fun anymore.
It's that whole, like, there's taking drugs, and then we have this, like, oh, he's,
He's a smackhead. Yeah. And it's negative.
yeah, it
Very
is. It
negative.
is.
But why is that? Because with this, it turns you into a criminal. They become the most manipulative liars and thieves you could ever conceive of. Alcohol, psychedelics, nothing compels a person to get money the way that heroin does.
Because of the dependency.
Because of the dependency.
Yeah.
They literally they would sell their mothers to get it.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
this overlaps with your Krokodil, which is presumably equally addictive.
Yeah.
And to me, the destruction that it causes in families, and I mean, because once the family cottons on that you're a smackhead, they don't want anything to do with you. Or they'll spend vast amounts of money sending you to rehab, where you will lie, cheat, and steal your way out of it. You'll do anything not to go to rehab.
Yeah.
And often people escape.
You're not generally a first-time drug user with heroin, are
No,
you?
no. Very few people go from zero to heroin. I don't think anyone sets out with the intention of becoming addicted to heroin
Of course, yeah, of course.
and say, this is my new path in life, is
So-
to become a scumbag.
Is it people who are already detached from the families, already got drug problems? living
No,
on
I
the
don't think so. I
street,
think it's
maybe?
often... It's pretty common. So I think it's often introduced... I would say most people probably smoke it first. And they'll say, here, have a hit of this joint, but the joint is laced with heroin. And
It's like nothing they've ever had before.
and they're like, whoa. Because it's euphoric, apparently. I've never touched heroin. I've never used it. It's a blinding rush.
I've been told it's like kissing God.
Yeah,
in the
I mean,
face.
to quote Train Spotting, we wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
I can't reveal too much, but there are people who are close to me who have been through heroin, and it's ugly. It's really, they become so selfish and so self-centered, and literally will sell themselves to get the drug. It's a major source of prostitution. So how do we categorize the worst drug? Is it purely on fatalities?
Well, that's the beauty of it.
Or is it the impact that it has on people? It's quite hard to...
The gruesome nature of Krokodil is like
It's pretty nasty.
pretty nasty, right? Like,
But
in that sense,
Very,
sure.
but actually, if we look at it coldly, the fatalities are low.
So the worst is subjective.
If at gunpoint we had to choose a winner, as a recovering alcoholic, I'm going to vote against my own team and say that alcohol is by far the worst thing.
I'm not sure I'm allowed to vote for myself, but I would vote for heroin.
Yeah, rules are you can't vote for yourself.
Then I would have to say heroin because
It's pretty evil, and the gangs and the gang related and the
Right, right.
cartels.
I mean-
and so the knock on the collateral is huge.
in my limited experience with addiction, it's just it's already a struggle. Then you talk about heroin, it's not even. It's a different completely. I can't even
But you
imagine.
see now, actually, I've just realized all of us know people who've dabbled with recreational drugs,
Right.
but heroin is that next step.
Yeah.
We all know, we're all cognizant of the fact that heroin is not to be trifled with.
But part of what makes alcohol so dangerous is that it's not considered the next step, even though it'll kill you.
It's a gateway.
Right? Like,
That's the first step, if anything. Look, I know I'm not allowed to vote for myself, obviously, but the only reason I wouldn't vote for Krokodil is just because of its accessibility, but the next closest thing would be heroin, so I think my vote would probably go towards heroin. If Krokodil was as prominent and prevalent as heroin, where people are walking through the streets with their flesh falling on the ground, I would definitely say...
Can you imagine, you got your family, you're walking down the street, and there's someone just with their limbs just rotting off. Just
literally looking like a crocodile and able to peel their skin back.
I mean,
to
but I
reveal
guess
bone.
then how fucked up am I to say, like, oh, somebody fucking barely breathing on the street? That's fine, but if they're on Krokodil...
But then, just to play devil's advocate, doesn't this make tobacco the absolute worst? Because it's so insidious. The invisible, silent killer. It's completely fine to smoke. It's harmless if you have a few ciggies. Apparently, 8 million people were wrong every year.
Yeah, I mean, I can't vote for myself, but I would. I can't, so I'll vote for heroin because probably the same for all of us. My own social, cultural background, heroin was always seen as the worst
Taboo.
drug. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was, 100%.
So I guess heroin wins then.
Woohoo! Do I get a beer?
Thanks for listening, guys, and a special thank you to Ian for joining us as a guest on the podcast tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
If you like what we do, the best way to help us out is by sharing, liking, leaving reviews, tell a friend. We really appreciate it. You can get in touch with us on Facebook and Instagram at Worst of the Worst Podcast or on Twitter at Worst of Worst Pod. Alternatively, shoot us an email at worstoftheworstpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts on which drug you think is the worst. Until next time.